don't you just love those theme songs for those bad guys and certain good guys, when it changes it up on Darkwing episode? Well, I know I do, and I sure am excited about today's podcast. Welcome to the St. Canard Files, a Darkwing Duck podcast. I'm your host, Will Santana, and
I'm Mike Russo, and I just can't get that Steelbeak theme out of my head.
Nah, I sure can't either, Mike, man. I'm excited today. We have a great guest with us here today.
Yes, we definitely do. We have Philip Giffin, the composer for Darkwing Duck.
Yeah, and he's Emmy nominated.
Oh, he is. Actually, yes, he is Emmy nominated.
All right. Hey, welcome to the podcast, Phil. How's it going, man?
It's going really well, and I can't be happier to be involved with you guys. I've only just recently learned about you, and I was thrilled that there's a podcast dedicated to Darkwing Duck, my old friend.
That's
Awesome.
your old buddy, huh?
Yeah, he's my buddy. He's helping me put my kids through college.
Oh man, that's awesome, man.
That's fantastic.
The good thing about cartoon characters is, they never quit or ask for more money. They don't become drug addicts. They're very consistent.
Now, Phil, man, I got to tell you, I'm jealous because you had a lot of fun composing that music for Darkwing.
Oh, yeah, right.
Well, I had a very good mentor, not necessarily in writing music for animation, but my mentor, and God rest his soul, is a guy named Michael Kamen. And you would have to look him up, but he's scored tons of great movies. He did all the Die Hard and Lethal Weapon movies, but a lot of other movies as well. But Michael was equally as comfortable with a 90-piece orchestra as he was a rhythm section and songwriting. And, I would never put myself on the same playing field as Michael, but I too am comfortable in both arenas because I produce records and I'm a songwriter too. But I do feel, I know a fair amount about the orchestra. I started out as an orchestrator. So, I can make an orchestra roar, but I feel pretty good in the realm of writing, rhythm section charts and horn charts and pop tunes and stuff like that. Once again, not at the level of Michael Kamen, but so Michael taught me something really important. He said, if you're not having fun, something's wrong. Because, and these are his words. He said, because remember, this is the entertainment business. Entertainment. And he said, when you play music, you should take the word play literally. Play like child's play, like playing in a sandbox or something. And if you're not having fun, then you need to change something. And that was really good advice. And once again, I know a lot of times when there's a deadline and people have a lot of money on the line, trust me, I take it very seriously. But one thing that's important is to keep remembering you're not doing cancer research or heart surgery, or someone's life is not on the line. So it's about entertainment. And I've always found that if I can figure out how to have a good time through the process, it just, there's a saying that it goes, if you love what you do, you never have a day's work in your life. And I would have to say, I definitely have experienced that. And that's not fantastic. To say I've had many, many all-nighters that it's just like, oh my gosh, I was, looking forward to seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But this has been really, really fun, my career and this life I've had in music. I've been super lucky.
Was this something you always wanted to do even when you were younger?
Basically, yes. When I was a kid, I can actually draw a decent picture. So I can draw a little bit and paint a little bit. So I guess maybe that relates to music somewhat. So funny enough, and I'm just realizing this now, I wanted to be, before I got into music, I wanted to be a cartoonist. I can't believe I'm just remembering this now. But because I could draw, I thought, well, I think I must have realized early on, don't count on fine arts. Get into, at least people that animate cartoons, they have a job every week. So I remember for the longest time, I wanted to be a cartoonist. And even as a young kid, like I was in elementary school, I lived in Columbus, Ohio. My parents were so supportive. They took me to an art class that was offered at Ohio State University. And I can remember being in this art class with all these, adults. Once again, I'm not saying I was at their level. I think it was something that they were offering, and they didn't have any age limit. And so my parents said, heck, let's enroll them in that. And I love that. But then when I was, I think around the fourth grade, someone gave me a guitar, and I just started spending so much time making up songs. And I remember the first song I wrote was about a car. It was kind of funny. But then, I got into bands when I was in junior high school. I guess they call that middle school now. And also through high school. And it was my dad that helped me realize, hey, you can study music and you can make a living in music. And my dad would read this magazine called Downbeat Magazine. And it's basically a jazz magazine. And they would talk, in that magazine, they talked about Berklee College of Music. And that's not Berkeley in California, but Berkeley in Boston. You guys probably know of it.
Right.
So that my dad is the one that got me hip to that. So I auditioned and got in and studied hard for 4 years there. And then I stayed in Boston and played in bands, different kind of bands, for an additional 3 years. So I was there a total of 7 years before I moved to LA. And when I moved to LA, because I had some knowledge, some musical knowledge, and some training in orchestration, I got all kinds of jobs, like copying jobs, and slowly but surely orchestrating jobs.
Now, Phil, I want to name drop a few of your credits, man, because there's some credits I just got to name drop them, man, because I'm excited. I love some of these films and shows you worked on.
Sure.
You got Pee-wee's Big Adventure,
Yeah.
Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, Say Anything, which is a classic. Mike loves The Simpsons, and you got credit on 12 of the episodes of The Simpsons. Nothing But Trouble. I'm not a big fan of the movie, but Tupac was in there, so hey, I'm a fan of it. Ladybugs, I don't know what it is about that movie, but I always loved it. I think because HBO just played it so many times when I was a kid. It was on all day, every day.
That's funny. So I should, first of all, it's always a mistake to interrupt someone that's complimenting you. So please continue.
And then I've never seen Boomtown, but that's what you were nominated for an Emmy.
Right. Now, I would recommend you can get that. You can get the full season. And sadly, it was a show that only lasted one season. And I know the president of NBC, even to this day, he regrets, he felt like maybe that was a mistake to cancel Boomtown, because it was so good and written by a great writer named Graham Yost, who did Band of Brothers. I think he did the show Pacific. His first big thing was Speed. He wrote that. And he also wrote some other show that I can't think of right now. But he is such a great writer. And that really is a great show that holds up. I'm telling you, a lot of times you see these things, maybe 10 years later, and you go, wow, I remember that being so much better than it is now. But that show really holds up. So anyone that's listening out there in podcast land, check out Boomtown. It has nothing to do with animation, but it really well written, good acting, everything.
Well, it's definitely more to life than Darkwing Duck, right?
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, so let's bring this conversation over to Darkwing Duck then, shall we?
Yes.
Okay, so how did you get hired on Darkwing Duck? What was the process of that like?
Let me rewind a little bit, because I think it was Will, you were mentioning some of those shows and movies that you really like. Some of those I was the orchestrator for, and maybe sometimes when you're orchestrating, the composer you're working for, he'll ask you to maybe write some additional music, and oftentimes composers will even give you that tail credit at the end, orchestrations and additional music by Philip Giffin. But for example, The Simpsons, actually a fair amount of those that you mentioned, Will, the composer was a guy named Richard Gibbs, a dear friend, phenomenally talented. And Richard Gibbs played keyboards with Oingo Boingo. And Richard had the gig of composer for The Simpsons for the first season only.
Yeah, before Alf Clausen came on board, right?
Yes, right. And I orchestrated all of those for Rich. And so the way I got the gig for Darkwing Duck, let me tell you something. When you're doing animation, at least back in those days when we were kind of, in a way, channeling Carl Stalling. Do you guys know who Carl Stalling is?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, good. You do, but some of your listeners might not.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So Carl Stalling did a lot of those classic Warner Brothers movies. But man, cartoon music, you're turning on a dime. Sometimes you have like this massive run. Let's say a character's falling down the stairs. Diddle 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 diddle, so boop 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 boop, and then it goes to like triangle, bing, yep yep yep. So you have massive orchestration broken down to like solo clarinet.
Right.
It is really time consuming because you're catching things like eye blinks. And when I say catching things, so you're syncing the music you're writing up to Darkwing Duck's eyes blinking, like blink, 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 something like that.
Yeah, you're scoring directly to the action.
Yes, and it's really time consuming. So I believe this is how it went down. Rich was offered the job of Darkwing Duck, and he just didn't want it.
Oh, wow.
For a couple of reasons. When you sign on to do an animated series like that, basically you're dead in the water. You can't take any other jobs. Mm-hmm. It's just so all encompassing. In fact, for me, what I did, and Disney, God bless them, they allowed me to do this. I had a group of orchestrators that were also co-writers, and I would give them themes. Each one of my characters I had themes for, and then each week when they would introduce a new bad guy, I would write the bad guy theme for that week. By the way, I learned this technique from the maestro himself, a guy named Mike Post, brilliant guy that's written a lot of TV music. So I'd have a team of guys, and then I would be very specific, like from here to here, use this theme, from here to here, use this theme, and so on. However, it's still the amount of arranging and compositional skill that's involved in putting together a cue. It's immense. So I would give all of those orchestrators 50% writing credit, which means they still to this day collect 50% of those royalties, which I haven't gotten any thank you notes from them in a while. So But some of those, I'm going to embarrass myself because I'll leave some people out. But some of the amazingly talented co-writers and orchestrators were Eric Schmidt, Steven Taylor, Brad Warner, Stu Goldberg, a guy named Jim Temple, or maybe it's Templeton. I'm sorry. And he has recently passed away, God rest his soul. And once again, I'm forgetting a couple of people, but forgive me. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the fact that it's a team effort. And also, as long as I'm giving shout outs, one to Richard Gibbs, who he passed on the job of Darkwing Duck, and he highly recommended me. And so they brought me in. I scored, the first show, and they liked it. So basically, I had the gig.
Do you happen to remember what the very first episode you scored was?
You know what? It has been so long ago, I cannot remember. In fact, I don't want to embarrass myself by the things I've forgotten, but I can't remember what the first episode was.
That's all right.
Probably we didn't score them in sequence, meaning we probably didn't. Maybe we did. Maybe there was a pilot episode. Actually, that makes sense that there would have been a pilot episode, the first one. But it was a lot of fun, but so much work. And that's why I owe a lot to my team of co-writers and orchestrators, which did allow me to take other jobs. I mean, I was doing other work, scoring movies of the week and stuff at the same time. I can say that now that I no longer have the job, but Disney probably would have been crazy about knowing that I was taking other jobs at the time. But it's all good, and it was a great team of people, including the team from Disney. They were all very supportive.
Yeah, Phil, I think the reason why he asked you that question is because there's a huge debate amongst the Darkwing community on what the pilot episode was, which one was the first one recorded.
Man, I'm so sorry. I wish I could somehow shed any light. I don't know. I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure it's the episode titled That Sinking Feeling. Tad Stones always says he wrote and recorded that one first. So it's very possible that was the first one. But that's my assumption.
You know what? When you said that just now, that did sound familiar.
Mm-hmm.
So have you guys interviewed Tad Stone?
We have
Not
arrangements for it. We have it arranged though. It's in the work. It's in the works.
Nice guy, and give him my warm regards. And it's been far too long since we've spoken, but that guy's brilliant.
Yeah, I'm gonna make this real quick because I definitely want to get back to this interview. The problem is Mike always tells people what Tad has said, what was the first recorded, but then some people debate what was the origin story. Just because it was the origin story doesn't make it the pilot,
Right.
Yeah.
I wish I could help out in solving this argument.
That's fine, Phil.
Okay. Well, Phil, you just spoke about some of the bad guy themes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it now. Let's get into specifics on certain of them, because a few of them that I really want to know about, like what was the motivation or what was the inspiration. One of my favorite characters in the show was Morgana Macabre. Okay. And every episode she's in, when she first pops up, you hear this theme song, and she doesn't really have like a villainous theme, but she has like a spooky theme for all her episodes, because she kind of looks like the Bride of Frankenstein or
Elvira.
Yeah, she kind of has that appearance. Was that kind of like your inspiration for creating her theme?
It was, and first of all, I really appreciate your support and your love for those themes. But my approach was, what is it? Take it on face value. In other words, with cartoon music, at least back in that era, I would never be afraid to hit it right smack on the nose. And then I would try it out. It's like, does this work? Instead of trying to think, instead of being fearful of hitting something on the nose, I would say, well, what is it like? What is on the nose, first of all? Let me define what on the nose is. And so I try to come up with a theme that is, in fact, on the nose. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes it's like, wow, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that works great. And it would stick.
Yeah, it definitely sticks because as a 10-year-old kid, when I first watched Darkwing, every time I heard that theme, I knew she was in the area. So I was like, yes, Morgana's in here. She's about to show up.
That's exactly the intention. So I'm glad it worked. I hope it didn't give you nightmares.
Well, there's a couple I really love that I wanted to ask about.
Sure.
First of all is Megavolt.
Right.
His theme to me, I always describe it as demented circus music. How did you come up with that?
Well, I specifically remember that being like, I thought, well, if I have to translate electrical current into musical notes, and I don't want to get too technically.
No, please do.
Too technical musically, but I wrote clusters. Clusters just means notes are really, really close together. And then I would make those clusters leap. Do be oi, and it kind of like had in a way, I don't want to say it sounded like electrical current, because it didn't really, but sometimes what it does, it helps me kind of get into, like, even though if I would play you that theme by itself, you wouldn't say, oh, that sounds like electrical current, because it wasn't like a sound effect, but it gave me almost a discipline, a jumping off point where I could start, and it kind of, that's how I came up with that. It's I have a piano here, but it's like,
Yeah. That was cool. And the other one I wanted to ask you about, now you came up with a great theme for the Muddlefoots, but you adjusted it depending on which of the characters was in the scene. Like if it was the mother or the father. Do you have any background about that?
Only other than you just articulated it perfectly. I would, the theme, you would adjust the theme kind of the way you would Mama Bear, Papa Bear, Baby Bear.
Yeah, because like Herb's theme is ponderous and dumb, and Binky's is sweet, but it's still the same theme. Right,
exactly right. So, and by the way, once again, bringing a lot of credit back to my co-writers and orchestrators. Oftentimes they would arrange my themes in a way that worked better than the way I originally conceived of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now Phil, I got to ask you about two more characters. One of them, we got to go with the voice actor Raw Paulson, the character Steelbeak. His theme, his character kind of vanishes throughout the series. Like he's not hardly in it toward the end, but his theme song is just so memorable with that saxophone or whatever you got going on there, man. It's just incredible.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to tune into this podcast because you guys, these compliments are. I'm just gonna put this on a tape loop and just play this I'm gonna play this podcast for myself every morning when I wake up. That guy, he's like like a New York mobster here, like that, and it just seemed. And once again, back to hitting it on the nose. What depicts New York? To me, it's jazz. Mm-hmm. So it felt like appropriate to give him a theme that had a swing vibe and a saxophone, like a cool jazz kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wouldn't make sense to score a gangster. Well, I'm not saying it couldn't work, but the way I was thinking, I didn't want to do some kind of orchestral thing like what I did for Darkwing is bum, 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 like that was kind of a heroic orchestral theme, but not for Steelbeak because that guy is, a street guy in New York City.
Well, now that you mentioned Darkwing,
yeah,
we got one more character to talk about that I want to discuss with you is Negaduck, who is the complete opposite of Darkwing, and his theme is like is grimy, is dark, and it's like the complete opposite, of what you expect on a Darkwing Duck episode.
right. And it's funny, you guys are helping me describe the themes because you're using all the verbiage that I would use. But I just try to think of what is the opposite of Darkwing Duck. Because, Darkwing is this heroic light. And then the other is,
Negaduck.
yeah, very dark and grinding and, the antithesis of Darkwing.
Which is awesome because they're both voiced by Jim Cummings.
That's interesting. You guys probably know more about the voiceover actors than I do.
Oh, really?
Probably because to me, I have to say, when I was watching those episodes and listening to it was just like I almost treated it like these were real people, even though they were drawn characters. I got so into that world, I didn't even think of it as a voiceover actor in a studio doing the voices. I just really kind of, I allowed my imagination to perceive the characters the way kids would perceive them, which, by the way, it should be noted that these episodes, they were not just written for kids, and that's probably why the show was so popular. They all had entertaining elements for adults, which made it fun for adults to watch with their kids. So you could get a laugh on an adult level that on a joke that the kids wouldn't even get, but still it would give the kids something to laugh at and give them entertainment as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll just throw out an example I always use, guys. There's an episode called Twin Beaks. Okay, my daughter's 5. What 5-year-old is going to get those jokes?
Right.
And there's jokes about the Far Side in that episode. Who's going to get that?
Exactly my point.
But there's a joke with bathroom doors. One says male, one says female, and it's a door for cabbages because cabbages are the villain. My daughter laughs at that.
Yeah.
So it works for her, but then we're laughing at the Twin Peaks and the Far Side jokes.
Exactly.
It's smart.
Yeah, very smart, because guess who ultimately controls the TV? And those are the adults.
Yeah.
Now, Phil, did you guys get to screen a lot of the episodes before y'all record?
Yeah, we would. Let's see, we would have spotting sessions. So we would. It's almost like you've heard of things called a table read. Well, yes. This wouldn't be a table read, but we'd sit around a table similar to that, and there would be, a monitor in that room, and we'd play the video, and we had a music editor, and so we would just discuss whoever was directing that scene, which, by the way, there are multiple directors throughout the season.
Yeah.
I would discuss, okay, here's what I have in mind for this, and this is what I'll do here. I'll start Darkwing Duck theme here and end it right here, where I'll take Steelbeak's theme. We'll take over from here to there, and we'd kind of map it out like that. That's called a spotting session. And then, once again, to Disney's credit, they gave me a full orchestra every week. And they don't do that anymore because nowadays, a lot of cartoons are scored, with sampled sounds. It's called out of the box.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, sampled sounds are pretty great, but
not the same.
Well, for me, it was sure fun to be conducting all those great LA session players.
Now, I wanted to ask a question about the evolution of the music on the show. Now, what percentage would you say at the beginning of the show was fully scored? Because I know Disney eventually would take those scores and put them into later episodes. Like, what percentage would you say of later episodes were fully scored and
That's
used?
A good question. It would be, like I would say maybe a third fully scored, and then what would happen is, you have a big library, and I specifically recorded things instead of big long cues. I recorded short cues,
right.
So they would be easier, almost like Lego pieces that music editors could snap in, and it would be easier for them to use smaller pieces. And so maybe a third of the shows were scored top to bottom, and then they would start to do what's called tracks. They would plug in some cues,
right,
in a show, and then that particular show might require less original scoring, and slowly it would we kind of wound down.
Right.
And then, like, probably the last third, they had so much music in their library, they could just cover it and, save a whole lot of money by not hiring a full orchestra every week.
Yeah. There's a couple of episodes within like the first 12 that has a Cajun villain. And all the music in those episodes, were written just for those episodes because it's all Cajun music.
Exactly right.
Then you get to later ones. It's like, I know where that piece of music's from. I know where that piece of music is from. I know that tune as well. So
right.
you can see toward the end, they're chopping them up and they're sticking them into different episodes.
Right.
And it works. It totally works. But
Good.
You can always.
I'm glad to hear that, a connoisseur such as you guys, didn't get sick of any piece of music that you heard multiple times.
I fell in love with it.
Not on Darkwing Duck, that's for sure.
Good.
Yeah. Now, Phil, I have an assumption here. Off the air the other day, we had a discussion that you scored 90 out of the 91 episodes of Darkwing. I did a little researching, and this is just an assumption here. I don't have hardcore facts or anything. I'm starting to assume that you actually scored all 91 episodes. What I'm thinking you're not getting credit for is there's one episode of Darkwing that is banned. It was only in syndication one time.
Interesting. That I don't know anything about. And frankly, at the moment, I forget there was somebody that scored an episode, and I'm spacing on his name, but I know he's really talented. Mm-hmm. But I can't think of his name right now. But okay. I don't know. Your theory could be correct.
Okay, yeah, because I watched a little bit of the band episode, and when the first piece of music that comes on is Morgana's theme, so I was like, he had to do something with that one. If Morgana's theme is already on there, the first theme.
That's definitely those are my themes. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so and I kept watching the episode, and like I kept listening to the background music. I'm like, I've heard that before. I've heard that one before.
If you ever hear an episode that doesn't have the Darkwing Duck theme, those themes that you're familiar, that would be the episode that I did do.
That's the thing. I can't think of a single episode. I have like 50% of these episodes memorized. I can't think of a single episode that sounds different to me.
What they might have done is like had someone, the other guy, score an episode, and then maybe they plugged in some of my themes into his. I'm not exactly sure, and I don't want to imply that they didn't like what he did, because I know that guy's really talented. And once again, I'm talking about someone that's really talented, but I can't recall who it is at the time. By the way, this was a while ago.
Yeah, we understand.
Yeah.
I did have one more question specifically about Darkwing. There were 2 songs in some episodes. I'm not talking about the theme song. There was an episode where Darkwing sings a lullaby to Goslin, and there's another one where Darkwing has a basically a rock song.
Yes.
Were you involved with either of those?
No, I think I might have. I think I wrote an accompaniment to that. So I made an orchestral accompaniment to that or something, but I didn't write them. I didn't write those songs.
No,
but somehow
the background music you would have.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, Phil, man, I really appreciate you being on our podcast, man. Is there anywhere where the people, our listeners, can find you at?
Well, you can always check out my website, philipgiffin.com, philipgiffin.com. And, you're always welcome to email me. And I just want to thank you two, Will and Mike, for your interest in Darkwing Duck. My sincere gratitude to you guys. I mean, it's so rewarding to have this come back to me like this out of the blue. 2 guys like you that know so much about that cartoon, so much more than I know.
Well, you're welcome, Phil. We really appreciate that too.
Yeah, you weren't easy to find either.
Well, I commend you. You guys should double as detectives.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Phil, man. We really, really appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much.
I could not have enjoyed it more. Thank you two immensely.
All right, Mike. So that was our interview with Philip Giffin, man.
Oh, he's so great to talk to. I love that interview.
Yeah, I didn't want to end the interview, but with time constraints, I know we had to end it.
Yeah, we've imposed a very specific time frame for these Flashquacks, but keeps us disciplined,
Yeah, it does. All right, well, Mike, man, where can the listeners find us at, man?
All right, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple devices, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, of course, YouTube, Amazon Echo, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all these other places I can't even think of off the top of my head. So that's where you can find us, guys.
Yeah, and for those who follow us on Facebook, man, I know you're going to hear this kind of later, but we just kind of hit 800 followers, man. That's a lot big for us because we were just only at 400 like 3 weeks ago.
I'm hoping by the time this episode drops, we've hit 1,000.
Oh, so that would be huge.
If we have, thank you guys.
All right, so no shout out. This is a Flashquack, and I just want to tell everybody, stay dangerous.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night, y'all.